So everyone, thank you for attending. This is fantastic, right? World Staffing Summit 24. It's really great for Candidate Lead to be putting this on. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. And thank you for attending our session, which is Measurable Growth Coordinated Lead Gen for 2024. We do have a panel of speakers, and so we are missing one at the moment. He's having some technical difficulty to get into the system, but we do have a good panel of people, and they should be able to provide a variety of perspectives and from different angles on like how they would approach this organizationally so that you can get the best bang for your buck. Just to give a little quick insight into like the rhythm of this, we are going to do some really brief introductions just so that you know who you're talking to or who's talking with you. We will then get into the meat of this. It's really 4 main pillars that we're going to dive into. So those 4 areas we're going to kind of break down and have some meaningful conversation around, followed by some Q&A. I will try to be mindful of the chat in the panel here, but certainly if we miss something, I apologize. You know, certainly like hang it back up or bring it into the Q&A. Yeah. So without further ado, we're going to go into this, and I also will apologize that I'm showing you the top of my PowerPoint. Unfortunately, I do not know how to do a screen share and keep you all in the system. So bad on me, but we do have at least a presentation to go for, right? So I'm Jeff Policio. I'm the founder of Allied Insight, and that is my QR code. If we are not connected on LinkedIn, please feel free to scan that code and connect with me. Be a great opportunity for us to be strike one. Thank you. But please feel free to scan that QR code and connect with me. I'll be more than happy to take some of these conversations offline, talk to you about whatever it is you're working on, or maybe like ideate on different stuff. You know, advice is always free, and it's always fun to chat about marketing stuff. I do own Allied Insight. We are a full stack marketing agency, which means that we do everything soup to nuts. It's close to having an inbound team. I think the main differentiator for us is while we do all the things that support the brand from a foundational perspective, we also make sure that we're supporting corporate initiatives and frontline activities. So we really do try to take a coordinated and holistic approach to our delivery. But you didn't come here to hear a pitch, but we will jump into next, which is Mark Winter. Mark Winter is with WinSource Group. They work through and create like sales models, right? So he can work through and help your teams in order to develop sales process, sales modeling. They have training components. They also do programming, I believe, right? As well as virtual management, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I feel bad that he's not here. So we'll let him kind of.
Wilson Learning, I would add. Oh, there he is.
Hang on a second.
Man.
All right, so he's not Jeff Policio.
We're just giving you a plug there.
3 out of 4.
I heard the plug. That was great, Jeff. You're hired. That was good.
Oh my gosh. Well, you won't have any trouble remembering my name because I'm not Jeff. So.
You can just call everybody Jeff. It'll make things so much easier.
By the time we get to the end of the session, Shannon will be Jeff. We're going to change her name. No, I'm kidding. So Mark, we're all just going to be called Shannon. Mark, if you wouldn't mind, can you supplement anything I might have missed? I didn't want to go past your introduction. So. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Jeff. We do sales consulting, training, and coaching in the staffing arena. That's our whole bag, and we try to keep things super simple.
Cool. Very, very cool. Thanks so much for that. Yeah, you bet. Next, we have Shannon. Oh, and again, this is Mark's QR code, right? So if you want to connect with Mark, please scan his QR code. That'll take you to his LinkedIn page. Connect with him, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now I think, Mark, you're caught up to speed. Shannon, the floor is yours.
I'm Shannon Kahn, and I have been in this great industry for several decades. And today I'm the founder of SMK Consulting and work closely with staffing firms on helping them build high-performing sales teams. And that includes strategy, structure, compensation, everything that goes into becoming a very strong, high-performing team, disciplined team. And a particular focus on and interest and passion about aligning and collaborating with marketing to make sure that both teams together really have the greatest impact on the overall company strategy, results, and goals.
Awesome. Awesome.
QR
Thank you so
code.
much. QR code. Listen, scan it. If you're not connected with Shannon, definitely connect with her. She's great. She's fantastic.
LinkedIn's a great way to connect with me. Definitely.
Absolutely. All right. And then we have Jeffrey Stats. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Stats, Jeff without hair. My grandfather always said grass doesn't grow in a busy street, so just think of that. But yeah, I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Haley Marketing. We do a lot of things, websites, different marketing technology, marketing services, supporting the staffing industry. My specialty is really on automation and marketing strategy and development. So I focus a lot in helping staffing firms do more with automation. So this one, especially since I was just on a panel around sales and sales acceleration, this is really good because this really hits kind of the pieces parts of really how to drive prospecting and do the right things for lead generation. So excited to be here.
Awesome. And again, QR code. If you're not connected with Jeff, I don't know anyone who wouldn't be already. But if you're not connected with Jeff, scan the QR code, connect with them on LinkedIn. All right, excellent. So as I mentioned, we're going to dig into 4 main sections here, right? As we look at creating lead generation campaigns, which I think arguably coming into this year on the back of the tail of the Q4, which was a little bit lighter than I think most anticipated or wanted, I think lead generation is definitely an area of focus for a lot of people. So what I want to do is break it into 4 main sections. The technical structure of lead generation, making sure that we all have a basic understanding of how it comes together. Then I want to look at some friction points. These are going to be sort of 30,000 foot view friction points though. So it kind of gives you an idea as to like maybe areas that you might have to spend a little bit more time in order to get in place. We'll then look at strategic delivery. So assuming that we were able to put together some of these nuts and bolts and create a good offer, how is it that that gets delivered out properly so that you get the best result? And then lastly, we're going to talk about 2024 offers that convert. So I think that there's a lot of things that have been done traditionally that are good, right? Arguably, they're still very good. But I think that today we need to be a little bit more thoughtful on how we could bring some different types of value to the marketplace in order to get attention and get conversion. So if everything is still working properly, boom, we're doing great. All right. So in this space, we're talking about technical structure, right? When it comes to a lead generation campaign, your technical structure is made up of these components predominantly. You need to have some sort of an offer. And again, we're not going to dig into the particulars of what is the offer. We're going to do that at the end. But you need something to offer, something of value. That thing of value should sit on a landing page that gives a bit more formal introduction to what it is. Your landing page should have a spot for conversion, right? So that's got to have some sort of a connectivity, as Jeffrey Stats was saying. It also has to have either a form or, even a calendar link. Not a bad idea. You can get into people's calendars. Automation of some level, right? So this doesn't have to be super intense. We're talking about even just autoresponders to let them know that they were successful in their submission. There's got to be some sort of lead flow management. We want to be able to monitor performance, right? How is this thing working? How are your people doing in their follow-up? Which then also leads us into follow-up and process. And then we also need to be able to feedback loop that entire thing, right? Bringing it back to the individuals who are running those campaigns in order to make sure that, like, if there are adjustments that need to be made in order to better improve those leads, that they can do so. And then again, the cycle starts all over again. So if this is the framework of what it is that we have, the thing I want to basically ask all of our panelists is, looking at all of this, which portion of the structure will staffing firms have the easiest time in executing because of their existing experience, right? Because of the other things that they've been doing over the last few years and dabbling in automation and doing all these other sort of efforts, where will they have the most successes? So Mark, let's start with you. You were last in, you'll be first out. So we'll start with you. Where do you think staffing firms will have the easiest time in getting their arms around the technical structure of a campaign?
Yeah, I think the 3 that jump out at me are the offer, the follow-up, and I would say maybe automation in that order. So listen, we've got the offer. We've been doing this long enough that we know what our value points are. So get them down, write them down, share them with people. Make sure you follow up. Follow-up costs nothing. It's just time, right? You can do that easy. And then if you're lucky, you've got some kind of system already in place that will help you with automation. The other stuff you might need a hand with.
Awesome. Awesome. And Shannon, from your perspective, like where do firms have an easier time of sort of juggling this technical structure?
Yeah, I think just on a subset of the automation that Mark was talking about is messaging. If you think about it, we're not a product business. We don't have features to go out and advertise and put out into the marketplace. So we've had to develop a way of communicating how we do our jobs and how we can service a customer. And messaging is a really, really critical part of that. So we've, as an industry, I think we've had to be good at that or better at that because we didn't have physical features to necessarily share with the customer. So if you already have that, so then automating that is just that next step in that process. And I would also agree, follow-up, this is not a one-call sale type environment. So follow-up has always been a really important part of success, and staying on top of the customer and staying on top of that communication and knowing that through that process is when you start to bring close those deals and bring those customers to the table. So I think those two areas, I would say, you already have sort of this embedded function and strength and that you can leverage.
Awesome. Awesome. And Jeffrey Stats, coming from the land of automation, being a CMO, obviously being entrenched in marketing, what are the areas that you think staffing firms would have the easiest time at?
I think it's the process. So, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, when I look at it from the marketing and, when they ask us, hey, we need lead gen, hey, we need, new prospects, hey, we need them engaged. Like the first thing I always ask is, okay, what's your process? We're just going to augment that process. So everybody knows how, like this digital is basically the digital donuts. Like you're dropping off this, you're doing that. I mean, essentially that's the MQL, that's the qualified lead of like what you're doing. So the process is really just how do we turn that, because the hardest thing to do is change mindset when you're starting a new campaign or you're trying to get something going. So how do you change the process, augment it, but don't change it so much that you're not going to get buy-in. But like, I think that they know, I mean, you know how to sell, you know what process you should be taking. It's just using this to kind of like take a couple extra steps, get the messaging out a little better. I mean, it's really that. I think, they understand it. It's just we as kind of doing this have to educate. Okay, this is what this means. Okay, this, there's a couple extra steps involved.
Sure. And I think from my experience in dealing with staffing firms, I think that they're really strong at identifying the metric, right? So like being able to verify the performance of what's happening in terms of like tracking. I would combine sort of performance to follow-up, right? So tracking to ensure that the follow-up is happening in the way that it is that you think it should be happening. I think that is truly at the cornerstone of like where staffing firms currently excel. I think you have a great way of sort of putting the components in place to say, if we need to verify that this thing was, this thing happened, this call was made, this follow-up occurred, you tend to do a very good job organizationally around that. In which case, I'll also point out, based on everybody's responses, the areas that they didn't mention were the landing page conversion point, which is not overly complicated. Like, just to simplify that for a moment, if you have a cut sheet or a slick sheet or whatever you want to call it, your one pager, that is sort of like a landing page, right? You could sort of associate that just like a web page would be. And being able to make sure that you have a way to convert, it just sits your offer, whatever that is, your ebook or your assessment, whatever, we'll get into that, but it sits your offer behind that page, behind that form, so that you can count it, right? We want to be able to make sure we can count things. The other thing that wasn't mentioned was feedback loops. And I'm just going to throw a little wild card out here to the panel. What recommendation would you have for staffing firms today that can help them be better at practicing feedback loops? Now, I didn't prep anybody for this. I know this is a wild card question, but what can they do to improve something like a feedback loop? Because outside of a campaign that we're talking about, any sort of lead generation, feedback loops can be wildly helpful in being able to improve the success of whatever the new approach is, whatever the new process is. So does anybody want to take a stab at that in terms of offering some guidance or advice on exercising feedback?
I'll throw out there that I don't think it's ever been part of a standardized process or way of doing business together between sales and marketing. And so that you have that common kind of refrain that you hear that all these leads are going out there, the salespeople aren't responding. Sales is saying, yeah, but they're not the right kind of leads. And so that gap between sales and marketing is really, has always been there. And so you have to put in place a structure around when you meet, what you talk about, how you give that lead, what the timing is of that feedback, that you'll make a commitment to each other that feedback will happen within 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever that is, and then hold each other accountable to that. I think unless you start holding each other accountable to it, it'll fall apart again. So I think that has just never been, it needs to be part of that structure going forward and commitment to each other.
Sure. Anyone else want to throw anything on there?
I think the success of the feedback loop is in the clarity of the expectation. So like, me in marketing, it's like, if I'm doing something like this, what do I want the expectation to be? What does a lead mean? And get these things out on the table. This is what we're hoping that is going to happen. And even if it's just not, if it's more directional, not specific, like we want 27 leads or we want this, like, this is what this is intended to do. And this is how we're going to do it. And then this is what happens, contingency plans, if we don't think it's happening. Now I need you. And honestly, this is what I would do even outside of staffing, is I would say this is a win-win to the salesperson. If I'm not giving you the leads, you can tell me I'm not giving you the leads. You win. If I give you the leads, you're making money. You win, and maybe you buy me a beer, dinner or something like that, just to say thank you. But
Sure.
but it is a win-win. So, but you got to have those expectations to build that feedback loop and give them, because during that you give them the why. This is why it's important. This is why I'm trying to help you out. And that's the trust that Shannon's talking about.
And it might be, I think expectations are so important, but it might be also just calibrating your expectations, making sure they're realistic. When you're first starting out, listen, you're not going to close 10 deals with your first email campaign. It's not going to happen, right? So the first goal might be, well, let's minimize bounce backs. Let's make sure our data is good. So be realistic about the stuff that you're setting out to do when you start, because there's a lot that happens behind the scene that you don't realize. You're doing some great things with branding and name recognition when you do these campaigns, and that might be part of your first goal.
Yeah.
Sure.
And to add to that, I think speaking from the sales organization, typically, if you ask them what would good look like, what would a good response rate be or a good click rate, they typically couldn't tell you. And your marketing team would be able to tell you, but your sales team is not going to be able to tell you because they haven't really been educated. So I think that mutual education and to your point on the rewards, maybe it's a team reward, a shared reward. Like here's what would good look like. So if we achieve that together, let's go celebrate. And then you start to trust in that connection between the two.
Agreed. I also think too, so feedback happens on a pretty regular basis inside staffing between recruiting and sales, right? But the thing we have to keep in mind is, from a recruiting and sales feedback loop, that loop is happening where individuals are sourcing other people, like they're sourcing the product, right? They're sourcing the candidate. And so there's a lot of human components that are in there that are filtering out. So when that feedback loop happens between sales and recruiting, where the recruiter brings in someone and the salesperson says that's not good enough and here's why, you're doing that and you're changing immediately the filtering process. It's also happening a bit more on a one-to-one basis, whereas when you're doing a feedback loop department to department on a overarching campaign, that feedback has to be done in such a way that we're still trying to make it administered not on that singular conversion, but on the thing that will work across all the conversions. So the scalability of it is a little bit different, but I think we could lean on our experience in providing feedback as we do today. We just have to, again, I think Jeff said it and Shannon said it, it's those expectations, right? Making sure that we set the appropriate expectations of the feedback that we need. Great. I love it. All right. Well, I think we've beaten this up enough. Let's move into the next one, shall we? So the top 5 friction points. Now, I did say in the beginning that this is going to be a 30,000 foot view item, right? So as we said, as we laid out the technical components, any one of those elements can be a friction point, just to be clear, right? You could have trouble, building landing pages. Maybe you don't know how to do that. Or maybe the concept of doing a form fill and having, gating either a content or a resource is sort of foreign to you. All of that's fine, and those can all be friction points. But when we take a step back as leaders and consider a campaign development, a lead generation campaign that we are going to coordinate our efforts across our internal and possibly external resources, I want to really focus in on these 5 areas. So they are a bit prioritized, just to be clear. So I believe, if you've never done a lead generation campaign before, it's not the end of the world. There are lots of resources out there that you could read up on from very reputable companies that will educate you on the basic principles of lead generation, right? But so if you don't have any experience, then that could obviously be hurdle number 1. Preparation. A lot of times, I've heard it many times over and over, right? Listen, it's never going to be perfect, so let's just go at it. Let's just send it out and see what happens. And that's not a horrible bit of advice, especially if you're dealing with someone who suffers from analysis paralysis, right? They're gonna kind of wait for it to be perfect. So that could be good advice. However, I am reminded of that expression that my grandmother told me, which is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Doing a little bit of work up front will save you a lot of effort on the back end. Execution. Maybe you haven't really been a part of the delivery of one of these things. Like you haven't actually, had to hit send or had to say, it's live or go. That could be problematic. Expectations could be off, right? Which can create a friction point. You might have these unrealistic expectations that this is going to shoot for the moon and change everything. And maybe that isn't really viable. And then last, I think, is probably capabilities. And I think this is pretty light today. If this session was happening 10 years ago, then we would probably be moving capabilities further up the food chain because there'd be a real lack of technology and resources available. And so you'd have to be trying to figure out how to manually muscle things through and use sort of stitched together resources to make it work. But I think today, capabilities really shouldn't be the hindrance. And so I think that's going to be pretty light. So hopefully that gives a good explanation as to why I chose these. And so now let's kind of go back to our panel. So in creating lead generation campaigns, where do you think staffing firms struggle most? And so let's start with Shannon.
Yeah, I go back to, I think the execution is where it falls apart. And I think partially because, again, the understanding of why are we doing this from the sales and marketing both are on the same page as to what are we trying to accomplish? Who's our target audience? Why are we doing this? What do we expect as far as results? If that isn't shared up front, then the execution falls apart. Competing priorities get in the way. And suddenly there's a lack of focus again on that, and it just fizzles. So I think that piece is which really, if you do your preparation and you bring in sales and marketing together to talk about why are we doing this, what do we hope to get out of it, who's our target audience, what is the process going to look like, how long are we going to run this campaign, then I think the execution will improve. But I think that's where it falls apart. So I think if you were to pick 2 to focus on would be preparation so that execution improves.
Got it. Jeff, how about you?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I am similar with Shannon because I've done this before. I've done a lot of lead gens, with downloads and different things like that. There is a direct correlation with the amount of preparation across the board, planning document, what happens when, this is what's going on, internal training. When I really prepare for something, it's going to be better. And that's the execution. But a lot of times, and being a marketer, we can half-ass some things sometimes, and we forget to tell the sales rep. Shocking, right? Shocking. Not me. The other Jeff, the Jeff up top there.
I knew it.
You son of a. But But it is like, that's what's funny is like the more like the preparation, we skip steps, and it's human nature. Like, we got to get this thing out. We got to get this thing out. And again, to Mark's point, like, yeah, we're going to promise, oh, we're going to get you 15 closed deals, $80 million. Like, it's all there. And then we care about the result, and we kind of work backwards, but we don't really tie those things together. So the prep is always the thing that, like, if you don't spend enough time, you're killing it. Like, it's going to, like, the execution's going to stink. Everything else is going to be terrible.
All right, Mark, you're up.
Yeah. So this one might sting a little. I have a pet peeve about the preparation. Listen, the list is everything. Who you're sending this to is everything. And if you're trying to shortcut that list by buying some vanilla list of data companies out there, you're going to get crappy results.
Yep.
Your list has to be curated. It has to be developed over time. It has to be warmed up. If you want good results, you got to have good data. You got to have a good list. You got to have good addresses. You got to have great contacts. Now, I understand that takes time, and I understand it's frustrating and costly and all that. But you can spend the time on the front end, or you can spend the time cleaning it up later. You're going to spend the time either way. So I think preparation is where I see so many people get frustrated. And what ends up happening, what's sad is, they use data from a source or something, expecting great results, and then when it doesn't work, they blame the process. They blame the marketing process, and they say, well, the marketing doesn't work. Let me try something else, and that's just not the case. The result is the result of you having crappy data.
Yeah.
Right.
All your data feels good from in the beginning because it sounds good, but it's really just a waste of time, energy, and resources when you don't have good data. You're absolutely right, Mark.
Agreed. That's like my biggest pet peeve. Go ahead.
Those resources are wonderful. Yeah. Like, I think that they're fantastic in terms of like giving your sales team more accurate contact information to do their outreach. Yeah. However, while you loading these people into your database definitely tells you about who they are, they still have no clue who the hell you are. So it doesn't matter, right? And even if you were giving away free money, people likely aren't going to convert on it because they have no clue who you are. They have no understanding or reason to trust you. I think I am kind of in the same ballpark, right? I think preparation is definitely a huge friction point, but I also think it's bookended by expectations. Yeah. So I think that, I'm going to start with expectations and move back to preparation. From an expectation perspective, I think that the industry as a whole has the benefit, the luxury of being able to change the course of direction by pounding the phones, by doing the activities, by getting in and creating all those sales initiatives to move the needle, right? And that's not how it works in marketing. Like, it's the days of like gamifying things with pay-per-click and trying to like, really move things forward in that fashion is just not there anymore. And so I think making sure that we set good expectations, to Mark's point, right? That like, if the database isn't warm, if you've never touched them before, if you haven't nurtured them with any sort of information or communication or thought leadership, then it likely isn't going to behave or do what it is that you want. I also think the expectation from the lead follow-up is important, right? A lot of times your sales group will think that all of these are blank checks that are ready to sign, that these are MSA deals and recs, and they downloaded a salary guide, so I should be able to close a deal. And that's also not quite it, right? I usually categorize leads as being a tier 1 as a blank check. Tier 1s are really hard to get, but tier 2 is behavioral, and that you can get, right? And I'm not saying like they clicked an email, so we're going to count that as a lead. I would say that would contribute to like maybe a tier 3 at best. But tier 2 is you provided something of value. They came in, they converted on it. They gave you a little bit of information to get some good knowledge. That's a good tier 2 lead. That's a behavioral exchange that you can now count on and follow up on. That then pushes into preparation for me. So under the preparation side, I'm gonna stack on top of what Jeffrey Stats said. In the preparation, it's not just the coordination of efforts, right? In its delivery. It's not just in like, what is sales going to do or recruiting going to do from a pipeline management perspective versus what marketing is going to do from a database perspective. But on top of that, It is training. It's training your team on what that follow-up looks like, how it behaves, what words you want them to use. How do you help them progress past the question of, hey, I saw you did that thing. Do you have any questions? Because that is the go-to line. Because they haven't done, in many ways, a lot of staffing firms haven't participated in this space. They haven't done lots of lead generation campaigns. So what you're doing is creating a mechanism to generate leads, which are worth a lot of money, and then not equipping them with the tools and resources and knowledge to follow up on them in a meaningful way that will get them into the next conversation about the MSA and about the rec. So I think my biggest concern on the preparation side is, in fact, training. I think training cures an awful lot, sets expectations both on the follow-up, but it also sets expectations on what these people that are converting are going to be. So those would be my areas. Does anybody have any insight that they want to share? I know that we're at 4 o'clock, so I do want to move through. But does anybody have anything additionally that they want to share on this, or should we go into the strategic delivery so we can stay on time? Heard. We'll move to the next one. Got it. So the next one here is the strategic delivery. In here, we just talked about training, right? Jeff Stats and myself, we just mentioned training is super important to make sure that you get your people in line, that they know what they're doing. But then you have your outreach, right? You've got database segmentation that you're working through. Active versus dormant databases. Are those being defined? How are they being defined? Messaging in terms of your outreach, your individual outreach from your sales or your frontline team, as well as your marketing broadcast messaging. And then again, we come back to performance and feedback. Like the strategic delivery of this, assuming that you've built the things and done the components, this is how you get through a lead generation campaign as a coordinated effort, company-wide, that will then push this forward and get you good results. So from here, the question I have for the panel is, which of these areas are you particularly passionate about, and what actionable insight would you want to share to ensure, like anybody that's on this session, to ensure that they could be successful in what it is they're delivering? So let's start with Jeff. I didn't start with you yet, so we're going to kick off with you first.
I think that, again, I think there's, it's putting all these pieces together. It's identifying what is the outcome. So again, what type of lead generation campaign are you doing? And when you're delivering it, is it delivering the expectations that you think it's going to deliver? And I think it's the documentation, and it's kind of like working through those pieces and then having checkpoints. It reminds me of product marketing and stage gate process and all that stuff. Like, okay, we've delivered this. How is that working? Yes or no? Do we need more? Move back if it's not going to work. And so I think there's an opportunity, like whatever campaign you're doing is just continually refining. And, again, like, is it, yes, no, like, is it actually working? Is it not? And I think when you're delivering something like that, there's gotta be, if it's working, expand it. If it's not, change it. And having the guts and honestly, the proactiveness to do that. I think that's the toughest part, but like, it's really working that in the delivery process.
All right. And Shannon, how about you? What area do you think is most important here?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is that there is a sea of information out there, and there is the customer on the receiving end is getting so much from all the different staffing firms, emails and videos and podcasts. There's just the volume is just tremendous. So I think you have an opportunity here to differentiate your company in how you structure this delivery. And that would be around discipline. Some to what Mark mentioned about really focus in on the discipline of making sure that your lists are segmented properly and who's responsible for updating those lists, and be disciplined about that. And you will set yourself apart from your competitors who just throw information out there and throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks. So I think that's one way to really take a hold of this. And if it means you do fewer campaigns, but you do them very well and you do them in a disciplined manner and you get the follow-up, you will be better off than saying, hey, let's do 5 campaigns and see what happens. That's not going to get you the result. So I would say, that phrase, go small to get big, build that process that is repeatable, scalable, and is truly differentiated, and you will stand out. And it will be translated to the receiving, on the people on the receiving end, is consistency, credibility, trustworthiness, and it's someone that I want to do business with because I like the way they communicate with me.
Yeah. All right, Mark, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say, and then take that segmentation and take that delivery and think about the timing of it all. Timing is key. So if too often, I think when we do campaigns, we do what's easiest for us. This week looks good for us. Let's launch it. Well, does this week make sense for your customer base? Is this the time that they'd normally be thinking about this thing that you're going to put out there in the marketplace? Be thoughtful about that. That's part of being strategic. You've got the bullet in there about individual outreach. Know when it's most appropriate to reach out to. It might be better to send 10 individual emails than it is to launch the campaign this time. So just be thoughtful about the receiver and be thoughtful about the time, and you get a much better response.
Agreed. I'm gonna not bother to mention, because I already got on my soapbox about training, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass. I don't want to take up too much time here. Because I do think that this is important. So I want to get into some offers that we think will work for this year. Look, I've started sort of like digging into this idea of asset-driven offers versus non-asset-driven offers. So I do want to explain briefly what that means. An asset-driven offer, things that we probably know best, are things like salary guides and checklists and white papers and market trends reports, while a non-asset type offer is one that would be a bit more like consultative or engagement based, something that your sales team can actually build, right? Absent of marketing. And then marketing can simply create those structural components like that landing page and the conversion form and all that to support what it is they want to do. So an asset, something that needs to get built creatively, while a non-asset is something that can get built strategically from your frontline teams. So with that, I would like everybody to be able to walk away with that concept. Does anybody in the panel, do you have any recommendations for people for the types of offers that they should be considering? And to go to Mark, to your point, consider the time of year, right? We're in Q1, we've just gotten things moving. Consider how long it takes to build and do some of these things. What type of offers, Mark, do you think staffing firms should focus on now?
I think it's what's relevant to your customer. I mean, that's where to start, right? So the key for these offers is to get them thinking about their business, not get them thinking about our business. So if we can send them things that are relevant to their business and it's good timing and it fits, then we'll capture their attention. Then we've earned the right to talk about our business when we call them or when we get to meet with them. But I think that's how it starts. So that can look like relevant market data. That can look like some sort of analysis that you've done in an industry. That can look like surveys. We've seen some good luck with surveys and analysis, because all the customers out there, they're all struggling for the same thing. They need people. They need people for productivity. And if you can help them get insight into where those people are hiding, whether it's their parents' basement or somewhere else, then so be it.
Sure. No, I've seen the like you said, surveys. Like it really like pings me into like the sort of the assessment concept. Like right now, time is short. Like time is of the essence. You're not going to have 2 or 3 months to build something out and design it and everything else. Your quickest thing, if you can create some sort of an engagement, right, where it's like, listen, we're going to help you with your talent acquisition strategy for the year, right? We want to help you assess that. You can create what your intake looks like and create an internal process that actually gives them something of value. It really starts to elevate your brand beyond filling a position, right? Yeah. Take it as an opportunity to elevate your brand as being an advisor and a partner in your community. It really sort of like moves you to a different level. Jeff, what do you have on your end, Jeffrey Stouts?
So I think from, looking at this in asset versus non-asset, from an asset perspective, to Mark's point, everybody's looking to see what's working, what they're missing, what is somebody else doing. I think staffing firms, and this is what I've been advising staffing firms to look at is, you have the ability, you're working with multiple companies. So, creating a checklist, creating like, this is what it means to be a world-class workplace. And we're using almost our own index to create that. And I think, having that as a download gets them in the conversation. Again, with salary guides and some of these other things that kickstart the 2024. On a non-asset offer side, the consulting, the strategic engagements, I go closest to the revenue. Clients that, you haven't had a placement in a while, haven't billed in a while. That's where you can just skip that asset and go right into like hey, we have a relationship. Now, what are you seeing? Surveys or whatever, but let's have a discussion. And so that's kind of where I'm playing both of these.
Love it. And Shannon.
Yeah, I would add that I think companies are looking for thought leadership. They're struggling too. And if you looking for what information would be most valid to those customers, going back to what I think Mark said too, is if I were to advise companies, what do I do when I walk away from this? Go talk to your current customers. Ask them what's top of mind for them. What are they struggling with? What would they like to know more about? You think they have all the information, but reality is they would love for someone to come to them and give them kind of a synopsis of what is really relevant in their world. And chances are whatever your current customers are thinking about and worried about, your prospects are going to be thinking and worrying about the same thing in that same sector.
Sure.
You can take that information and use that. And everybody wants new customers right now. I hear that all the time. Take that information and target new customers based on thought leadership and topics that are really current and relevant to your existing customers. Ask them.
Love it. I love it. So we're going to move into, listen, this is just like a brief overview. If anyone wants to take a screenshot, this gives you at least some idea in terms of like, as you're going to have conversations with your people internally, this gives you really good positioning statements to be able to justify why you might want to do more coordinated lead generation efforts. The real risk for your business risk is loss of competitive advantage or campaign performance lag, limited market reach, and things like that. Meanwhile, on the opportunities to adopt, you have things like increased ROI, improved lead quality, shorter sales cycles. All of these things will help really get you into a better spot for 2024, which, I don't want to be a doomsdayer, but I think it's going to be tricky, right? I think that the year is still a little bit fickle. I think that people still aren't very comfortable, depending on what country you're in too. That's going to play a big role as well. But I think there is nothing wrong with putting together a little bit more preparation behind your efforts in order to get a better outcome and better result. I do apologize. We have definitely hit like the top of the hour, or the top of our time. So we do not have time for Q&A, unfortunately. And I appreciate everybody putting chats and things into the side panel here. Again, these are our QR codes. If there's anything that you want to take offline to each of us, please feel free to scan those QR codes, connect with us on LinkedIn. We'll be more than happy to give you some assistance and advice on whatever it is that you're working on. And again, thank you all so very much for joining our session. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.